Welcome everyone to this afternoon, the Future for Nature Awards 2025, and a special welcome to all of our sponsors who make this event possible every year. My name is Rasha Nuiten. I'm the Director of Future for Nature since 2020. Now, over time, this name and this logo has got many meanings for many of you. For some, it means hope. For some, it represents a life purpose. For some, it may be a motivation to do your daily work. And for some of you in the audience, it may mean celebration, like we have one today. We celebrate the achievements of these young, brave people here in front of me, and I'm happy we can do it with this many people today. But working in nature conservation isn't only celebration and hope. There's a lot going on in the world, and there's many disasters happening every day. On a large scale, like the forest fires in South America, or the cuts in the funding for conservation work that affect the daily work of conservationists. On a population level, one single poaching event can eradicate a whole plant species from the earth forever. Or the enormous numbers of bycatch, fish that find their death in nets all over the world every day. On an individual level, animals are being caught. They're being trafficked, killed, or kept as pets. Now imagine, if this is what you face day in, day out in your work, how would that make you feel? This is also conservation. And over the past few years, I had the privilege to meet many wonderful young conservationists. And I've seen what it does to them. I have felt their despair, their loneliness, and their frustration of fighting an unfair fight. But what I've also seen is that these frontline conservationists, they are a special type of people. They are determined, they are strong-willed, for sure, and they have fire in the belly. So to me, this logo has actually come to mean something else. When I see this logo, I think of these people. And I think of all the young people that have won this award over the past 18 years, and they've come to form this wonderful Future for Nature family. And I wake up every morning to work towards the fact that this logo will mean something for them too. So this Future for Nature family, we support it not just today, but we support it throughout the year. We bring them together, we provide tailor-made support to every laureate, wherever on the globe he or she may be, so that they can be together, and they can feel less alone, and they can start to share the despair, they can share their stories, also share love stories, everything. They find a shoulder to cry on, and also a family to celebrate with. This is us last November in Kenya, and if you look at them, you can see genuine smiles on all of their faces. This is the magic that happens when we bring them together. And I was so privileged to be a part of this. So to them, hopefully, if we continue to work together, this will mean hope. Now, without further ado, I would like to present someone to you that actually represents this hope. She embodies this hope. She's a conservationist and a wildlife filmmaker herself, a positive force for nature. We have been so thrilled to have her with us since the beginning. She's been creating this beautiful show since 2008 together with us. She's the chair of our International Selection Committee, but above all, she's the mother to our Future for Nature family. Please welcome Saba Douglas-Hamilton.
Well, thank you, Rasha, and what an incredible audience to see here today. I have to confess, I don't think we have been filled to the brim like this since before COVID. So it's a real triumph, and I'd like you all to acknowledge, please, Rasha, with a huge round of applause, who really has been leading Future for Nature from strength to strength. Well, it is wonderful to be here on this 18th celebration of the Future for Nature Award event, especially since it's been quite a roller coaster period these last few months. I think you'll all agree. with many of the truths that we hold dear and close to our hearts, like how important scientific knowledge is and our long-standing political alliances, really being shaken to the core and coming under attack, as well as a brutal ransacking of the wild world that is picking up at an awful pace. So to get through this tumultuous period, we need to hold onto each other tight. The relationships that are important to us. We need to fortify our hearts. We need to live by our principles, and we need to believe with all conviction that we shall overcome. Because now more than ever, we need to reach out across the lines that divide us and to stand together for the good that we believe in, for science, for facts, for truth, and for the glorious unity that we find in our diversity. Nature's rawest power is the enduring strength of its diversity, the unending evolution of all these species through time, and their myriad approaches to the challenges of life. And of course, biodiversity is what has made us what we are today. I mentioned last year that all complex life on Earth evolved from a single extraordinary moment when a eukaryote came into being about 2 billion years ago. But did you know that since then, every single one of us has been colonized by about 29 trillion microbes, minuscule forms of bacteria, viruses, and fungi that live all over us and inside us and call our bodies home. The diversity and the happy symbiosis of these gazillions of invisible hitchhikers is what keeps us alive and thriving. It's our microbiome. So diversity is hugely important to us as individuals, but it's also important to us as societies that have been built on the strength of diversity, of all the different viewpoints and skills and knowledge that's been accumulated through the centuries, that has powered our scientific endeavor and gathered material across cultures from all over the world. Yet, as we know, science and knowledge are under attack, just as we are beginning to reach the verge of even more epic discoveries, thanks to new technology like AI. So in my world of elephants, we're already able to appreciate their world in a very detailed and nuanced way, thanks to GPS radio tracking. This ethereal light map displays the movements of more than 200 elephants in North Kenya over a 30-year period, which gives us a real portal into their minds. At first sight, it looks a bit like those wonderful networks of mycelium, you know, those long micron-thin filaments of fungi that run beneath the surface of the earth, or maybe even the synapses in a giant brain. But for me, this is the wisdom of matriarchs. It's the booming of their infrasonic calls across a vast landscape. You can see how the rivers are intensified by light as elephants surge towards them, these lines of lifeblood that go into the dry landscape, and the thickened arteries up there in the corner, which show the corridors, these secret corridors that elephants run through at night in human-dominated landscapes. This is what I call the song lines of elephants. It's their collective consciousness, loaded with memory and intelligence, intentionality and emotion. And it's these voices that help us understand who elephants are and what they need to adapt and thrive in a rapidly changing world. This imprint of consciousness by one of Gaia's wildest nations is just one of millions of others that overlap each other as elephant voices and all the other species in their range and far beyond encircle a world with this marvelous wild consciousness. AI can take this kind of information much further, expanding our ability as human beings to detect hidden patterns in electromagnetic, seismic, and sonic frequencies, and even begin to unravel their particular meanings. So there is this real possibility now that we are standing on the verge of something quite extraordinary, this ability perhaps to start cracking open animal communication in a very real way and have them tell us what it is that's going on in their minds, revealing all of their different intelligences and consciousness. But how do we treat these diverse voices that we can now hear? And what will we say to them? These bring up a whole range of ethical questions that nobody's really been thinking about. Whose hands should we entrust this fragile truth that could perhaps bring us to a higher state of civilization and coexistence? Well, to me, there are no better stewards for this than the young people that we celebrate each year at Future for Nature. These passionate, dedicated individuals like our three winners today, Anthony, Ruthmery, and Kumar, who are truly making the most extraordinary difference. And as Rasha mentioned, 6 months ago, we had this wonderful pleasure of joining the entire Future for Nature family in Kenya. And it really was an amazing experience for an old-timer like me to see how these saplings that were planted all those years ago have grown into these magnificent fruiting trees. And the trees themselves have become a fizzing, wonderful, integrated forest where all their creativity and their compassion and their intelligence and their motivation is combined in this incredible synergy to change the world. So, with diversity under siege, what greater act of rebellion is there than to hold our heads high and celebrate a powerful global voice in biodiversity and sustainability in the form of Brigitte, Baptiste, who is our guest of honor. As the former director of the Alexander von Humboldt Biological Resources Research Institute, she is widely known for her interdisciplinary approach to ecology that blends science, culture, and social justice. Brigitte is trailblazing as a public figure. And I have to say, it's a pretty flamboyant trail, rather like a bird of paradise, as one of the most visible transgender women in Colombia, where she's actively promoting diversity, inclusion, and gender equity, seeing them all as critical components of environmental and social resilience. Welcome to the stage. It's a joy to have you here, Brigitte.
Well, thank you, you all, the family of Future for Conservation. Thank you, Rasha. Thank you, Saba, and the board of the foundation, because it's a deeply honor to be here and also to celebrate those young conservation guys that will talk a bit about what they do during these last years. As you see, the flamboyant issues, I'm dressed by my wife, which works with clothes made with biodiversity, just trying to help me to explain a bit more what I try to do, which is start conversations about biodiversity. Let's talk about what we wear. Let's talk about what we use in our daily lives. But today, I want to share with you some thoughts about the place we hold in the extensive network that Saba showed with elephants, but the extensive network of all beings in the planet. Because we can represent with the help of AI, and I will use lots of images made of generative AI just for teaching purposes, to just look at this huge network, which is alike the universe and all the stars that are being mapped during the last years by the astronomers, and try to locate yourself in there. So the question is, when we speak from nature, when we speak to other species, where are we located? And this picture shows a bit how do we talk to species, because we know a lot about why should we preserve life. It's an ethical question that we have solved many years ago. We need to preserve life because they have the right to exist. But there's also the joy to share the world with them. Of course, when it goes to slugs in the house and they go every night after the food of your cat, it's not that nice, according to my wife. But still, this biodiversity that lives in our home, we share the space with them, like small spiders, like bugs that are around, and if you live in a tropical country, you'll get a bit bigger beasts sharing the space with you. But then, after the why, we also need to go to the how, and you've seen lots of things going on in terms of technology for conservation, in terms of research capacities, in terms of institutions, and we are here doing things showing that it's possible to do conservation, and we are very ingenious doing that. So the question that remains is, where are we located again? Where do we speak when we talk about nature? Because ecology has, like in philosophy, shown us that we are not in the center of the universe. We are being pushed every year far away from the center. And nowadays we feel like we should be more humble. We should acknowledge that we are just one piece of this immense network of life. But still, we have a particular condition. We can talk about that, and we can discuss the effects of what we do in nature. So the question about where are we now means that we acknowledge that our existence, our evolution is a moving scenario, that we have produced a lot of change in the world, more frequently for bad than for good, but also by doing that we are changing ourselves. And how far have we changed us? It's not that we have trillions of microbes in our bodies, but we have at least 7 milligrams of plastics in our brains. So that can explain why I'm so big sometimes. But I'll try to overcome that. But also we have have been able to move around this situation and ask who we are nowadays, which is placement, the placement. And if you acknowledge this is the Sixtine Chapel in tropical terms, this is why the Pope now is Peruvian, because he needs to know, and probably he knows better, the Amazon and the Peruvian rainforest. We can think of ourselves in very different terms, and that's what I am asking you to do today. 20 years ago, 200 years ago, 2,000 years ago, 20,000 years ago, where we as humans were located. And this is a fantastic trip. It's a travel, evolutionary travel, it's a cultural travel, which has produced a very different type of humans. And every morning when you see yourselves in the mirror, you should say, yes, I am a totally different human than the one was living in the planet 100 years ago. So the question for placement is fundamental, but also the question of identity, of who we are and where are we sitting now. And the ability to answer the question about our relation with nature. Are we speaking from nature? Are we speaking as nature? Because there's lots of discussion about the artificial intelligence, artificiality in everything, technology as something artificial and then being questionable because of that. So at the IPBES values assessment, we discuss a lot about this issue of how do we feel, how do we interact with other non-human species, with places, with any ecological entity, such as this theater, for example, or this technology. They are all ecological entities that interact with us, that are part of our ecosystem. We have built those for our sake. And so we must not complain about ourselves, because we are part of nature. We are trying to do our best as a piece of nature, but perhaps we need to become more aware of this fact. We are an experiment, an evolutionary experiment that has produced hundreds of different cultural readings about nature. So cultural diversity has always been able to create languages, to create explanations about the presence of animals and plants. They have ontological discussions on what is this, what is not this. So there's many expressions of the ecology and many ways to talk about nature. And we cannot hope that we will assemble a universal view of the human ecosystems, because we come from a place and we celebrate being born in a particular place or having an experience, an embodied experience. I will emphasize this because we are moving towards a virtual experience. We are moving towards artificial experiences inside the computer, and that will probably make us think twice on the place we are sitting in. This is an image about virtual animals thriving in the digital ecosystem. This is an artistic piece of work, of course, because animals cannot live in Second Life, which is one of the multiverses or the paraverses that are inside the machine. But with sensors, such as in the case of elephants and other animals that are now wired, we start to share spaces and communicate better with other species. And there's the question that Saba mentioned. How are we going to interact in those different dimensions of the universe? Who are we becoming is the question. We are changing our bodies, we are creating technology to improve our senses, we are hearing new signals from nature, and this is surprising us, and this is changing us all the time, because we cannot just think that the universe is changing and we stay still. So change in our own consciousness, change in our own bodies, change in our own experience will follow, and every day will be more important for us. And something that we have learned, for example, in this issue, is the feminine revolution, that women in the world have said we are not just pieces, biological pieces of the world, that we can control our bodies, that we can decide upon our reproductive forces, and this has shifted humanity, I think, from the very beginning of the humanity. We can challenge our biological condition, and this has opened a door for inquiry, for ingenuity, and for liberation for the whole society, not just for women. And that's so important because nature now has a different meaning. Nature is not the biological stuff that it's outside to go on Sundays and to have picnic, but nature is embedded in our guts, and nature is something that it's bugging our brains all the time with real signals. So as we age, our awareness, our consciousness also changes, but in the personal dimension, but also in the social body. everything will be moving towards new experiences. And this doesn't mean that we don't keep bringing a bit of blood to the mosquitoes or enjoying the mud in the field. This is a lovely and very important experience for the conservation community. You need to get in touch with the organic dimension of the world. But we are giving a new sense to this connection. So our body will get probably more wired to the ecosystem through our technology, and this is going to be very important, and it's going to be a game changer for our capacity to report on biodiversity, to report on the ecosystem transformations, and to design new ways to recover diversity and to regenerate life in the world. So this image, which could be a bit, we say, disturbing, a person just plenty of wearables, kind of feeling the pain of extinction, for example, or feeling the joy of recovery in the body, could be a new expression of communication with the living beings, with Earth. So what we know now is that we have a challenge to forge a new humanity, and what I mean is not post-humanity, as many people is talking about, it's transhumanity. We are going to change our own consciousness, our own capacities to live in the planet, just to recover the life, and we can really engage better as stewards of life. That could be that we migrate into machines, like in the movie Matrix, or at least that we will be more in touch with other ways of sensing nature. So what we are seeing nowadays is that even in the dispute, the political dispute of the world, and this complex uncertainty that we are living in, there's grassroots movements, there's industries, private sector, governments, and yourselves doing really incredible things. And that's the seed of this future that, combined with technology, combined with institutions, will provide us with hope and will options. And now we have real clarity about the challenge which lies ahead. We need to be creative, but we need to be willing to change the place we are located in. We need to think about our body, and we need to think our social body as well. And you, well, of course, you all are forefront of this transformation, because it's happening. Even if we don't are very aware of the health discussions around the world, such as One Health Initiative, the discussions about artificial intelligence and the codes of behavior for that, and all the discussions about how to deal with extinction or de-extinction or genetic engineering, those are more important than ever, because they will relocate us in the map of biodiversity. So I think that we are all expanding our awareness and, of course, the sense of duty we have towards the rest of life, and where we will, I guess, start to really protecting other species because of this conversation that we will be able or are starting to develop, and to celebrate that we are not merely here for change of the rest of us, but we as persons should be available for change, for living with less, probably, or with having more joy with what we have, or doing different things. So I think that this moment in history is giving us new opportunities to celebrate our capacities as humans, as creators, as artists, and less greedy, less and less lethal to the world. This I wrote just to close the question. We are moving and we are thinking from other place than before. And it's quite a shift on the history of humanity, because caring is our most profound evolutionary trait. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Brigitte. With the breathtaking expanse of nationalities, cultures, ecosystems, and endangered species that are encompassed within the Future for Nature family, where better really to celebrate diversity? And of course, the strength that we gain from this passion that is shared by all of our members and their real commitment to trying to make a difference. So I'd like to take you all off across the world now to hear what a few of them have to say. And we leap across the Atlantic first to one of the great freshwater wetlands in Brazil to hear from Gabriel Massacato and the giant armadillos in the Pantanal.
Hello everyone. The Armadillos and Honey Project is a conservation initiative that was created in 2015 here in Brazil by the Giant Armadillo Conservation Program. The giant armadillo mainly feeds on ants and termites, but habitat fragmentation is forcing the giant armadillo to seek an alternative food sources, such as bee larvae in hives. One individual can destroy beekeepers' livelihood in a matter of a week. The object of this project is to promote the coexistence between beekeepers and giant armadillo by certifying beekeepers that are using mitigation measures. We have now 100 beekeepers who are using mitigation measures to protect the beehives in 5 different states and 3 different biomes here in Brazil. One of our main goals this year is to evaluate the program and find new ways to coexist with the giant armadillos and beekeepers through art and environmental education.
And now we head over the sea again to India, to the Chilika wetlands, which is Asia's largest brackish water lagoon, to catch up with the fishing cats and Tiasa adya. These top wetland predators are found mostly outside of protected areas. In fact, 90% of their range is in human-dominated landscapes, much of which is now being bulldozed by development. So Tiasa has a lot of conservation ventures that tie habitat enrichment together with local livelihoods, like making products out of the invasive water hyacinth, or developing a market for this very special organic, sustainably grown, indigenous, flood-adapted wild rice that grows up to 6 feet high and simulates fishing cat habitat. Not only is this super conservation friendly for the cats, but it's also used by lots of threatened fish species and is a haven for nesting birds. If the rice is sold at fair trade prices, it can bring a good return back to the farmers, which boosts the economy. The danger otherwise is that the wetlands get leased out for industrial scale fish farming, which is the most destructive form of land use. So it's absolutely critical to stop this kind of thing from happening and reverse it to ensure that these areas have an ecologically sustainable future. So now we scooch over eastwards to Indonesia to catch up with our champion of songbirds, Adam Miller.
Hi, this is Adam from Planet Indonesia, and I just want to start off by saying a huge, huge congratulations to all the new Future for Nature winners. We're so excited to have you as a part of this program. Winning the Future for the Nature Award was really a huge turning point that helped Planet Indonesia begin its pathway to scale. We just reached our 10-year anniversary, and two big lessons have been learned. One is that conservation works because of, not in spite of, local communities. Frontline communities are our best partners in safeguarding the planet and our whole entire future. And the second lesson we've learned is the importance of partnerships. At Planet Indonesia, small steps have become big strides since we began partnering with other NGOs across the archipelago. Recently, we mapped out 40 million hectares with partners where our core model could be applied. That's an area that's 10 times the size of the Netherlands. And so we've learned that only together, with local communities, with other NGOs, and with government, can we truly fight this climate crisis and safeguard some of our planet's most rare species.
So this is a topic that keeps on coming up again and again, that we're learning as we go on this long conservation journey about how we save endangered species and the increasing importance of the local people being the real stewards that carry this movement forward, which is why it's wonderful to be able to introduce you now to our first winner. Born in a small village in the high Andes, Ruthmery Pillco hails from the indigenous Quechua Paruro community, which I think brings a very special flavor to her perspective on conservation. As a little girl, she dreamed of being in the FBI as a crime-solving investigator, but her crushing fear of heights and her rather diminutive size were perhaps a little less intimidating than she desired. But she was always enchanted by the tales she was told by her grandmother, stories of the ancient ways of the Quechua and their relationship with the land. So her sights very soon turned towards ecology, initially into Costa Rica, working in forest conservation. Well, one night, as she was walking through the forest, a beady eye appeared before her, blocking her path. Thinking it was a bird, she stumbled forward with her flashlight and caught a furiously lashing tail and the one-eyed squint of a puma about to pounce on her. So she whipped off her backpack to protect her stomach and grabbed all the bushes and thrashed them around, roaring ferociously until it backed away. And then she slid off down the path to try and put as much distance as she possibly could between herself and this predator. But just as she thought it was safe, the puma sprang out again beside her and then disappeared off into the forest. Well, Ruthmery tells me it was hunting her, but I see it perhaps as something a little different. It was her first encounter with a forest spirit that came to help open her eyes to see the world differently. Because after this, she began seeing pumas absolutely everywhere. And in her quest to better understand the forest ecology, scaling immense trees looking for species, her fear of heights completely disappeared. Ruthmery's coming of age in this wild environment and her resurrection of the Quechua passion for the wild is of enormous significance to the cloud forest and its wild inhabitants. So I cannot think of anyone better to protect this fragile world and to win this award today. Ruthmery, welcome.
Itarip itari ukukucha, itarip itari ukukucha, chaki chakita ol karispa, maki chakita ol karispa. Chakiri chakiri ukukucha, chakiri chakiri ukukucha, maki chakita ol karispa, chaki chakita ol karispa. These are the words of the ukukus. They are sacred creatures for the Andean culture. They are half human, half bear. Every year, men dress in this black dress and black mask, simulating the Andean bears. They are the only allowed to climb the Ausangate Glacier in June and bring back blocks of ice back to the community to bless the water, the land, and the crops. However, now the snow is melting. And just like the glaciers, the ukukus are also disappearing. I grew up in a small town in the high Andes of Cusco, Peru, called Paruro. Since little, I was very short, but sometimes I feel lonely, so I found peace in nature. Nature was part of me. I can go out to the field, climb trees, and speak to the trees, and I felt comfort. She's my grandmother and my parents. My grandma, it was my great inspiration. She will tell me stories in Quechua about the world, how much she dreamed to travel and discover the world. Through her, I inherited courage, passion, and adventure. And like her, I got the chance to follow that dream. I was the first of my family to go to university, although my parents imagined me to be a doctor with the city life, in the office, with a clean clothes. Instead, I chose biology, often in remote places, often muddy, away from phone signal, and more close to bears than Wi-Fi. My curiosity took me down to the lowland rainforest, hot, humid, loud, and I spent many years in this amazing ecosystem. I learned a lot. One day, in COVID, I received a call, an opportunity in Peru, in a place that I haven't been before, in the cloud forest. At this moment, I felt something, and I say myself, it's time to go. The cloud forest. Yes, the cloud forest is a forest covering clouds almost across the whole year. These clouds are traveling miles and miles from the ocean, from the lowland rainforest, and they're pushed by the winds through the Andes. I live and work in the Andes of Peru in the place called Huayquecha Biological Station, in the middle of the Andes and the Amazon. Here, as I mentioned, the clouds are pushing to the mountains, and the trees are covered in mosses and orchids, and they're all capturing this moisture from the clouds and releasing back to the system. The Amazon is just not the lowland rainforest. The Amazon is more than that. It's from the glacier to the cloud forest. Everything is connected. Everything is a system. At this moment, I felt this is where I belong. This is my passion. However, this amazing ecosystem is under threat. Deforestation and mining are pushing, with climate change, the clouds higher. And from the top, we have cattle and fire that are eating away this amazing ecosystem. The cloud forest is getting smaller and smaller. I used to walk in places that used to be green, alive. Now they are dry, burned, and silent. We are just not losing trees. We are losing water. We are losing life. We are losing stories. But within the mist lives this amazing creature, the Andean bear, also called the spectacle bear, or in Quechua we call ukuku ukumaris. They are the only bear that is found in South America across the whole Andes. My team and I studied these bears by using camera traps and satellite GPS collars, so we can know where the bears are, what they are eating, and what's the role they are playing in the ecosystem. They are shy. They can weigh up to 170 kilos. They can rub their backs on trees as a way to mark territory, but they can also be playful and curious. They travel across the lowland and the highlands, feeding on a variety of trees that they can climb up to 40, 50 meters. They're very skillful climbers. They can even court a mate on the trees. That's something amazing. But they are just not fascinating animals. They are the gardeners of the forest. As they eat fruit from more than 200 species of trees, they can spread these seeds in their droppings, and they help the trees to grow and regenerate the forest. Bears are forest, forest is water. Water is the Amazon, and the Amazon is the lung of the planet. Our data shows something remarkable. These bears are using national protected areas, mining concessions, community lands. They are showing us that nature doesn't know about boundaries. It's not enough to protect areas. We need to listen to the bears, and we must work with people and communities in conservation. At Waikecha, we bring school children from around to the forest so they can feel the forest, they can sing to the bears, they can plant trees, they can learn about the cloud forest. We often say they are the future, but they are the present. We need to continue building more conservation ambassadors. We also work with local communities, restoring degraded land, headwaters, building corridors, planting trees that the bears and nature needs. One day, I was on my desk checking camera trap footage, and something came in the screen. This tiny little creature is the dwarf deer, about 7 to 10 kilos, Mazama chungi, or as we call in Quechua, Waiku taruca. This creature is hiding, surviving in the same forest and facing the same threat as the Andean bear, but without the same attention. There is no captive animals of this species. It's almost invisible for science. At this moment, I felt something. It's like I found my spirit animal. It's like this little deer was speaking to me and saying, "You are in the right path." This is not just about wildlife. It's about restoring our bonds with nature. It's about ensuring that indigenous communities, women, can also lead conservation. It's about showing something that is hidden, that's like the little deer, the forest like the cloud forest. It's about us working together. This award I dedicate to my family, to my mentors, Dr. Adrian, Dr. Andy, and to my amazing and diverse team, young biologists, young wildlife veterinarians, volunteers, local leaders, interns, and to my beloved working conservation dog, Ukuku. Thanks, Future for Nature, for letting me raise the voice of this little deer about this amazing forest that is the cloud forest. We need to remember that we are part of nature. As humans, we can do so many amazing things. And now is the time that we all work together softly with the same passion, courage, because nature needs us more than ever. Anyai, thank you.
Such an incredible story, Ruthmery. Thank you. So now we go to the green hills of Rwanda, to Olivier Nsengimana and his team at the Rwanda Wildlife Conservation Association, who have converted an old disused trailer into a dynamic mobile classroom that they call the Crane Cruiser, to introduce school kids to the vital role of pollinators, all the different wild habitats, the marvels of bird society, and even to learn how to navigate with echolocation like bats. So this sparkling, interactive learning experience has reached close to 2,800 people last year, and of course, you can imagine it's wildly popular. So for these efforts and so much more, I'm delighted to say that Olivier was just honored with a Gold Whitley Award last week. And if any of you are ever planning to go and meet your ancestors in the form of mountain gorillas in Rwanda, you should definitely take time to go to his study area in the Rugezi Marsh, to go and admire the crowned cranes and stay in this lovely eco-camp, which will soon be up and running for visitors. So I think you should all go. It's amazing. Well, we're now going to go to Sumatra to be with one of our most impressive eco-warriors and the winner of the 2017 award, Farouiza Farhan, who continues her fearless fight to save Sumatra's forests. And as the old world order appears to fracture around us, she's very kindly sent us a short message to bolster our hearts.
Hi, my name is Farouiza Farhan, and I work in this landscape called the Loiser ecosystem in Sumatra, Indonesia. The Loiser ecosystem is this vast landscape of 2.7 million hectares of relatively intact forests, teemed with wildlife. It is also the last place on Earth where the critically endangered megafauna, the Sumatran tiger, rhino, elephant, and orangutan still roam together in the wild. Many people have asked me, what is the biggest threat to the Loiser ecosystem? When they ask, they half expect a straightforward answer, like palm oil, mining, or illegal logging. But in reality, the threat to the Loiser ecosystem is similar to the threat of any other landscape around the world. It is the belief that we need to exploit nature in order to bring prosperity. It is the belief that technology will solve all of our environmental problems. It is the belief that most people, like you and I, does not need to take action because it is up to the government. The change in the political landscape are impacting the change in conservation landscape. Dismantling of USAID have negatively impacted conservation in the Loiser ecosystem as it has negatively impacted nature and species conservation around the world. I hope we don't take this as a time of despair. I hope we take this as an opportunity to band together and show the world that we can do better. It is time for all of us to unite and shift the narratives. All of us take part in conserving nature and conserving species, because this planet belongs to all of us.
Many of our conservation allies have been very badly affected by the USAID cuts, like our steadfast laureate Samia Saif in Bangladesh, whose phenomenal efforts to embed wildlife crime prevention into national law enforcement systems have been gutted overnight with the sudden freeze on funding. In the Persian Gulf, on the shore of Iran, Mosen Atogolipur, our valiant guardian of marine species, has been monitoring the last 30 critically endangered humpback dolphins, which is an amazing thing to see, but also pretty heartrending. I spoke to him yesterday, and he said that both the humpback dolphins and the rays and sharks in the Persian Gulf suffer from the same shared problem, which is increasing overfishing driven by increasing poverty. Despite there being 2 marine protected areas with an area of around about 400 square kilometers, the dolphins' preferred habitat is close to the shoreline where these fisheries are very active. So, of course, there's a huge risk of bycatch mortality as well as disturbance and injury. And this sudden shutdown in funding, together with the massive inflation that's recently taken place in Iran, many of the environmental agencies that normally monitor these areas have been crippled by lack of funds and manpower. But Mosen has been very quick thinking and got his team out there to do a rapid risk assessment of all of the data that's available to try to figure out where the most critical areas are, where the dolphin's home range overlaps with the most fishing practiced. And he's managed to basically define where these hotspots are and kickstart much more focused conservation efforts. He's also got local government involved and thinking now about the possibility of alternative livelihoods like ecotourism, dolphin watching, things like that. So fingers crossed, both of those 2 laureates of Future for Nature are in enormous need of help. So please keep them in your minds and in your hearts. So now it's time for our second winner of the award, Kumar Paudel, who I think is a bit of a Renaissance man. He's a scientist, a poet, a songwriter, a teacher, a high-altitude cyclist, a tiger tracker, an author, the vice chair of the IUCN Pangolin Specialist Group, and has a master's in conservation leadership from Cambridge University. But his parents think he reads so much, he must just be a student, and it really is time he gets a proper job. Born in the high mountains of Nepal, near the China border, at a time when child mortality was very high in the area, and being the 5th of 6 children, Kumar often jokes with his parents that they took a bit of a gamble bringing him into the world when there wasn't much food to go around, because he's got such a hearty appetite. But how lucky the wild world was on the day that he popped into the universe. His journey has been monumental. Physically, from a tiny mud and stone house in the remote mountains to Cambridge, where he'll soon be starting his PhD, and also spiritually, using a double helix of wisdom and compassion, a twin focus that he attributes to his parents, that's helped him reach out gently and successfully to his community, helping to shift and raise awareness about pangolins, while also ferociously championing these creatures that are the most trafficked mammals in the world. Kumar's conservation model combines scientific research, policy advocacy, and effective grassroots action, and is something that can be replicated across South Asia, bringing, finally, some hope for these desperately endangered creatures. He is highly accomplished. He's definitely not still a student, and he's hugely deserving of this award. Kumar, we couldn't be more delighted to honor you today.
Yeah, namaste everyone. Yeah, thanks, Saba. I was born and grew up in a small mountain village in Nepal-China border region. So you can see that was my house in the middle in the raid. So from that tiny village to all the way here in Netherlands, in this stage, speaking about the conserving pangolins. I'm feeling a little bit strange because when I was growing up, pangolin was something that we eat in the dinner. My parents were farmer, and when I was growing up, so my job was mostly like helping them in rearing cattle, mowing grass for the buffaloes and cows. So that's how I grew up. And my parents, they never got a chance to go to school, but they always like encouraged me to be educated. But for that, so I had to walk 2 hours downhill to go to school, and also they walk another 3 hours in the evening to climb up hill to reach the house. So that's how I developed a very strong connection with the nature and the species there. In the winter nights, I used to go with my father to sleep in the cow shed to protect our cows and buffaloes from the leopards. And at that time, in the night, so I used to hear pangolin digging the sound in our millet farm. But in the morning, so I wouldn't see the pangolin. There are just the burrows. And that always fascinated me. What are these amazing creatures? So what are they, how they like came in our village? So I was so curious. But it was not only about the curiosity. For many people, like us in the village, it was just source of the another wild meat. And also for some people, it was just source of the money who would just collect the pangolin skulls and sell in the nearby Chinese market. So living in the border area, so our lives were like a little bit into both legal and illegal things. It was quite normal, people getting arrested for smuggling golds or wildlife parts, or the some legal like handmade bricks, apple, to everything. And I have seen how the wildlife are being smuggled from those areas. And from that start, so when I was 15 years old, I moved to Kathmandu to continue my higher education. Then I learned about what is the level of the pressure to all the amazing species facing, and so our actions dragging these species toward extinction. Then I remember those pangolins that I was seeing in my backyard, and I felt, oh, so maybe I could help to save them. And that's how actually my conservation journey started. And I always felt, because so I have seen very closely how the people poach wildlife and how people smuggle it and how it's being disappeared. So I always thought conservation is all about human choice. It's all up to people, what they decide to kill, what they decide to protect. And I thought, so if we really want to save these species, then we need to understand people, what drives them to poach wildlife. Only then we can stop them. And that drove me to meet with the wildlife prisoners inside the prison in Nepal. I visited prisons across the country for 2 years, learning who are they, where they come from, and how I can stop them from doing so. And it was really a kind of roller coaster ride, I should say, because sometimes I was really sad listening their puberty, their different struggles in life, and sometimes I was really angry because they were telling me that how many wildlife they have killed. So it was very difficult time for me, that 2-3 years. But that was really eye-opening as well, because I learned so many things. So I learned especially about the motivations of people, why they decide to poach wildlife, why they decide to help the organized smugglers in the illegal wildlife trade. And it's not always about the poverty. It's about, most of the time, even people don't understand what serious crime they are committing. And also they don't understand the consequences of the punishment. Nepal has world's one of the highest punishment, 15 years imprisonment, and around $7,500 fine, which is really high because so we just have the $1,400 as per capita income. But still people get involved in the wildlife crime. So it was really interesting, as well as very eye-opening. And one person I met in the prison was really interesting to me because he was telling me that he was arrested mistakenly and it was injustice to him. And he was saying he just ate a fish. And I was quite confused, and I checked the court files, and then I showed a picture to him saying, "Is this the fish that you ate?" And then that person said yes. And in my research, what I found is so many communities and people, they're not always motivated criminals. They just don't know what they're doing and what are the consequences of it to the species and also their own lives. That made me realize in conservation, I think the first step is making people aware of the conservation values, perception, attitude, and behaviors. That's why in my work, a little bit influenced by my early days connection to nature, a little bit poetic, and the science, I try to use different creative mediums like writing songs, poetry, animations, and different kinds of things. And this video is one of the examples that what we do. So for the pangolins, local bushmeat is not only the trade. So the major threat is coming from the international illegal trade because pangolin scales is one of the major commodities in the market. And it's so if you don't know, the illegal wildlife trade is one of the biggest trade in the world, multi-billion-dollar industry after drugs and arms. And pangolin is the most trafficked mammal. Even when I'm speaking right now, every hour 10 individual pangolins are killed in the world. And Nepal, being situated nearby world's biggest wildlife market, the source of the two pangolin species, Indian and Chinese pangolin, they're having additional threats. And what we do is, so we train border securities and enforcement agencies how they can detect and identify pangolins in trade and break the international chain. And also in our work, so we continuously conduct scientific research to generate new knowledge and understanding that help our conservation on the ground. So we work with the communities to then change their perspective and behavior towards pangolin conservation. And also we work with the key policy and decision maker to make sure that pangolin gets space in the conservation decision-making room because pangolin is often ignored because so most of the conservation is focused on the charismatic megafauna and all around, so it's quite easy to forget them. And one example is for last 11 years, we are running Nepal Pangolin Roundtable. Every year, gathering all the pangolin stakeholders together in the same room, discussing what are the challenges and how we can together build the solution to save the pangolins. And it's been a quite long journey in conservation from coming from a very humble background and also from a very small, tiny village in the foothills of the Himalaya, all the way, so accepting this prestigious Future Nature Award. This is really reassuring me I'm not alone in this fight. And as we already understood that, so there are so many threats for the pangolins, and sadly, they are quite disappearing from many parts of the world. Even we are yet to gather the full information about their population, their species-wise distribution, reproduction, and so many things. And this makes me really sad, right, to see the level of exploitation and what little information we have. But also, I feel really hopeful for the conservation because I hear from community people saying, they rescued a pangolin and released it in the forest instead of eating them. When I see the news from the authorities, they say pangolin from smugglers and released to the habitat. When I see a single child drawing pangolin with love in their notebook, and a community forest and national park when they say, oh, we have a plan to protect pangolins in our forest. So that makes me really hopeful because conservation is all about the human choice, and I'm really proud that we are changing the choice to protect pangolins. And this all the work is not really possible without my amazing team at Greenhood Nepal, our amazing advisors, supporter, partner, donors. I'm here because of them, and I'm being able to convey this message of the conservation to the world and to you all. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to be here. Thank you. Thank you.
Another incredible story. Well, Rasha spoke earlier about the marvelous synergy that is coming out of the Future for Nature family that is being amplified by funding now being put into conservation projects that bring our laureates together. And so two of our superheroes in South America, Els van Lavieren and Fernanda Abra, have launched something called Reconecta Suriname, inspired by Fernanda's work in Brazil, to monitor Suriname's 4 paved roads where the roadkill frequency is even higher than it is in the Brazil-Sao Paulo area.
Hello everybody, I'm Fernanda Abra, a wildlife conservationist from Brazil. For years, I've been working on the Reconecta project. That is a project to reduce the impacts of roads on wildlife. When roads cut through forest, animals are either forced to cross and risk their lives being hit by cars, or they don't cross the road and become isolated in fragmented patches of habitat. Both can lead to population decline. And that's why I implement solutions like canopy bridges and wildlife underpasses so animals can cross the road safely.
And I'm Els van Lavieren, working in Suriname. When I visited Fernanda's Reconecta project in Brazil, I saw the potential to bring this solution to Suriname. Even though we have only 4 paved roads here, it still impacts wildlife massively. So with the support from Future for Nature family funding, we teamed up to launch the Reconecta project Suriname. The first step was to collect the data. How many animals are roadkilled and which locations are roadkill hotspots? And the early data is striking. Roadkill in Suriname is even higher than in Brazil, likely because of the higher wildlife densities. That's why this project is so important.
So the Reconecta project is a scalable initiative. And I think this collaboration shows that within the Future for Nature family, we can learn and help each other.
Together, we're building more than just bridges. We're building a future where wildlife can move freely and safely again.
Well, we're now going to go to Europe, where last April marked an enormous achievement for our ocean guardians in Europe, led by Wietse van der Werf, when the second ship of the Sea Ranger service was baptized by your lovely Queen Maxima. The Sea Rangers have been working very hard to restore oceans and coastal regions through social impact, training young people about marine conservation who come from disadvantaged areas, and also giving them jobs, paid jobs in things like a seascape restoration. Well, the Sea Rangers have now expanded their restoration efforts across 6 countries in Europe with the intention to scale up further, and have even inspired the UK government along the way, who've now just announced that new social impact criteria will be included in offshore development. So we're super proud of everything that they're doing, and also that Queen Maxima slipped out of her high heel shoes to leap on deck, which made this moment go viral. Definitely a woman after my heart, and thank you, ma'am, for making this so popular. Well, we now move on to our final winner, Anthony Waddle, who's based in Australia, but actually grew up very close to the bright lights of Las Vegas in a small suburb, almost entirely surrounded by Mormon evangelists. The youngest of 3 brothers, the family were very hard hit during the Great Recession in 2007 or so. So Anthony had to work 3 jobs to get himself through university, which I think embedded in him an obstinacy, an enduring obstinacy in his approach to problem solving. For the last 12 years, he's focused entirely on frogs, working to save them from the most devastating disease known to amphibians, which is the chytrid fungus. Many giants working in this field have already thrown in the towel when it comes to chytrid, basically having completely run out of ideas of how to solve this problem. But Anthony, rather like an amphibian, has never developed a thick skin. He absorbs the entirety of the world around him and every detail on frogs that has ever been discovered, which, with laser focus, he's whiplashed into the battle of defeating chytrid, coming up with one of the most significant breakthroughs in 20 years. So, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to introduce a knight in shining armor, Anthony Waddle, the Prince of Frogs.
Thank you so much, Saba, for the intro. So I think conservationists all have that person, that animal, that spark that got them into this job. And mine was my grandfather. His name was Anthony King. It's pretty appropriate that I carry his name, because he was that spark for me. He was a photographer in Las Vegas when the city was quite young, and his job was to document historical events and some of the major celebrities like Marilyn Monroe, Elvis Presley. But in his retirement, he found new subjects, and he loved landscapes. You know, it's pretty boring out there in the middle of the desert outside of Las Vegas, and luckily, he would take me along on his excursions to take pictures. And I became known by my mom as his little buddy. One day, he took the most amazing picture. And why I love it is it's a paradox. I grew up in the Mojave Desert. This is the hottest, driest desert in the United States. But we found places so unlikely. Water in the middle of the desert. And here, I would be interacting with nature in the way that I loved best, kind of harassing animals a bit, trying to find them, look at them, touch them, learn about them. But my grandfather was doing exactly the same thing, interacting with nature in the way that he knew best, through a camera. This is a perfect moment. When he took the picture, I didn't think much of it. But in hindsight, this was everything. This was my childhood. Both completely content, feeling at peace. I became quite the nerd growing up, loving wildlife, walking around with little snippets of facts about random animals, the things that would capture you in documentaries. And behind me is a great example of that. This is the Australian gastric brooding frog. And what makes it so interesting is the way in which it reproduces. So females of the species, they swallow their fertilized eggs, their stomach becomes a uterus, and here, those eggs develop all the way into small frogs. She then has the worst case of morning sickness I can think of, and she throws them up, and there's little frogs jumping everywhere. So for a nerd like me, I'm like, this is the coolest thing. But for health science researchers, this was so intriguing because what was going on in her stomach? Why wasn't she digesting her young? And they thought if they could understand that mechanism, they can come up with therapies or treatments for diseases that could help us combat or diseases that we have, thereby a frog helping us with human health. That's crazy. Unfortunately, all that information was lost. We'll never learn anything from this species because it's vanished, it's gone extinct. So what's going on? Since 1970, frogs all over the world have been vanishing. And this has been happening kind of in concert everywhere, where scientists have come together and they're saying, hey, this is weird. Like this frog I've been studying my entire career has gone. Last season there was thousands of them and I can't find a single one this year. And no one knew why. It wasn't until almost the turn of the century that a young Australian graduate student, Lee Berger, discovered the cause. The cause of the biggest pandemic ever known to wildlife. A microorganism living on the skin of all the frogs that were coming in that were sick. Batrachochytrium dendrobatitis, otherwise known as the chytrid fungus. This is an incredibly widespread problem. The pathogen comes from the Korean Peninsula. It is spread worldwide through the global trade of amphibians. What makes it so devastating is it infects hundreds of species. It's not one species impacted, this is hundreds. This includes frogs and toads, salamanders and newts, and a bizarre group called the Sicilians. This disease affects the skin of frogs, infecting the tadpole mouth parts, but also the skin here. You can see this red kind of area. This is where chytrid's absolutely devastating this frog's skin. And why this is bad is to frogs, their skin is everything. It's how they interact with the environment. They absorb nutrients, get rid of toxins, and damaging this really delicate layer, this vital organ, puts tremendous stress on their bodies. Their hearts can't cope, and they die of a heart attack. So what can we do? Captive breeding is the best way that we know how to preserve species that are on the brink. You can bring them into captivity. That's what we do with my study species here for their conservation. You can preserve them and protect them. But the problem with that is you can't get the species back in nature. Because when chytrid gets into a new environment, it's a permanent part of that ecosystem. Always going to be a threat. So you can breed frogs in captivity and release them, but they're going to get sick and die. It's a frivolous process. So my research focuses on ways in which we can allow them to coexist with the pathogen in nature, taking that burden off of them. So this is the green and golden bell frog, or in Latin, Latoria aria. This is actually a really cute one. One of our boys in our colony, and they are an incredibly cool Australian species. And they carry the Australian sporting colors, green and gold. They are the biggest, baddest frog out there. They eat everything, including each other. Oh, poor baby. And you could think of them as the apex predator among frogs. They have a really important role in that ecosystem. And their loss does have consequences, and they have been hammered by chytrid. Unlike in some areas, these frogs experience seasons of sickness. So just like the human flu, we have winter outbreaks. So the chytrid fungus loves to be cold, and in winter, all the frogs get sick and they die. But in summer, the hot temperatures, the fungus can't cope with them, and it more or less goes away. So we have this really discrete window where we can generate solutions to combat this threat. So winter is what we really need to focus on. And using what we already know, we can go back to the basics. What do we already know about chytrid? What is its ecology? We can learn things to use for conservation. This is a great example of frogs from the north of Australia. They were highly susceptible to chytrid, but in areas that had these big granite boulders, they were doing just fine. And what was found is that these boulders, they absorb energy from the sun and they exude heat at night. And when the frogs come out and they're active at night, they increase their body temperatures, bake off the infections, and they do just fine. We can use areas just like this as natural refuge, moving frogs from struggling populations, putting them at populations with this type of habitat, and they're wildly successful. Well, in Sydney, we don't have big granite boulders, but we do have a hardware store. And that's what was born, from that was born the frog sauna. So we very cheaply and simply can go grab some bricks, stack them up, paint them black, and the frogs use these as habitat. And to make the environment perfect, we put a little greenhouse over the top, and this keeps it super steamy and warm, and it's the perfect cozy place for our frogs to cure their infections. And how they work is frogs find this. They actually love this type of habitat. They can live in urban environments with this type of habitat. They increase their body temperatures. They cure their infections. And even if they venture out and they don't have access to this, a really surprising result we found is that they're immunized. If they get through that first infection, they're way more resistant to future infections, like a vaccine. And this was a tremendous breakthrough for conservation for amphibians impacted by chytrid. It got worldwide attention. Can't believe frog sauna was in the New York Times. And I'm so proud of it. This was a culmination of a lot of work. We have to work from the basics up. But I also work in really small, struggling populations. We'll give them these habitats, and we're putting them out, giving them the ability to use this habitat to prevent themselves from getting sick. But there may only be 50 frogs in a place that we work, so we also want to give them the edge right away to preserve that population. And we do this with our little spas. So we have a sauna and a spa. The frogs are getting everything. And what this entails is we put them in a little bath of medicine that kills the fungus, and they have the same result. This works incredibly well. Right now, we have a pop-up vaccine clinic where we capture all the frogs in the population, we give them our little spa treatment, and then we release them. And what we're finding is the frogs that we don't treat, they're in bad shape. They have high infections, and over time, they increase and they disappear, meaning that they're probably dying of chytrid. For the frogs we treat, they get really mild infections, and they just go away. Chytrid's not really a big deal with them in the winter if we give them this treatment. This is amazing. So we have two ways to take the edge off, finally, giving them like a little bit of relief from chytrid in the wild. And this is going to keep these populations on the landscape right now. But this problem is massive. Hundreds of amphibian species have been impacted. And I think these are really good solutions for the medium term, but they're not permanent. With that many species impacted, we need to think about alternatives and use maybe more progressive approaches. So that's why I'm also looking at approaches in gene technologies. And how this would work is there are a lot of species that have already figured out how to live with this enemy. And we can use proteins that they've already evolved to protect species that are going extinct. And then they can pass that on to their offspring. This is a permanent solution to this problem. And while I know it's controversial, we need permanent solutions, and this may be the only way we get there. So this is not some intractable worldwide problem. Here in the Netherlands, chytrid has devastated your salamanders. They're all but extinct. Fortunately, I heard that Burger Zoo has just taken over some of the last remaining Dutch salamanders, and I think they're in good hands. And my hope is that we can be creative and innovative, and moving forward, that the narrative about chytrid and amphibians is one less of loss and one more of restoration. Now, I see tons of young people here tonight, and that's spectacular. Because we need you. We need you to join arms with us. We need you to help us in this fight. And if you've heard something tonight that has inspired you, you need to reach out to us. Because now is not the time to be shy. Now is the time to be bold, brave, because you are the future. Thank you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think we can all agree that we have heard 3 phenomenal stories today from these young champions and the endangered species and ecosystems they protect. Hugely impressive. Thank you all so much. We're absolutely delighted to have these new 3 winners join our growing Future for Nature family that now totals over 54 conservationists, leaving the charge to heal our planet in 33 countries around the world. And the strength and breadth of this impassioned young alliance is something that we can truly be proud of. But with the ongoing grind of things like sanctions in places like Iran, the shock and awe tactics coming from across the Atlantic, we cannot deny that our wider conservation family has been battered, with many now in desperate need of bridging funds to keep their critical work afloat. So if you've not yet committed yourself to the wild world, today is your chance to help. We just can't wait for other people to step in to do this, and we cannot remain silent. Every single one of us has a duty to act now on behalf of nature. And though it may feel like our individual actions mean nothing, that's not true, because every single step we take together, and we become a formidable force for change. So please spread the word about what you've seen tonight. Recruit more people to the cause. Help us build this alliance for the wild, and join hands with our young heroes by supporting them financially where you can. No donation is too small to make a difference, and no donation is too large either. Please don't forget that. So now this is the moment we've all been waiting for, when we hand over their awards. Brigitte, would you come onto the stage? And I would now like to invite our wonderful winners, Kumar, Ruthmery, and Anthony, to come and collect their awards. Well, if we haven't quite convinced you enough yet about the importance of protecting nature, I want to let you know that Future for Nature has launched a fantastic new podcast series profiling many of our previous laureates. And here is a trailer to launch the first episode.
Welcome to the Future for Nature podcast.
Maybe we can start with one of the cards and check one of these questions.
Yeah, let's do it.
Can you explain to our listeners what makes wetlands such a critical habitat for biodiversity?
This is about plants. But Peter, you work with plants. Yeah, you got that right.
Can you tell us more about the illegal trade in birds?
I want to ask this question too. Wow. Can you introduce us to conservation dogs Clive and Keisha? So tell me about Clive.
I'll tell you, if I see a spider monkey using our can of bridges, I'll die. Because it's going to be
fantastic.
Fantastic.
Yeah, really.
We have a very clear success story, but for me, that is no guarantee for what's coming in the future.
Ooh. But in one word or one sentence,
What would you say motivates you every day to fight for a future for nature?
this is like the beauty pageant question. And it's like, ooh.
And those of you in the audience that have got budding eco-warriors of a smaller size, we're delighted also to announce the publication of a children's book that comes along with an educational package by the Future for Nature Academy, which has been inspired by the true life stories of all of our wonderful conservation heroes. So I'd like to invite the production team, the author, publisher, and illustrators onto the stage so we can give you a big round of applause. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have now come towards the end of this wonderful event. And before we go, I just want to say the most enormous thank you to everybody that is involved in making this happen. From the Future for Nature Board, the selection committees, both the national and international, the event organizers, everyone at Burger Zoo, and the volunteers who just slave and put so much energy and time and commitment into this event. Thank you all so much. So in a moment, I'm going to ask the audience to leave through the door over there out into the auditorium where you can help yourself to a celebratory drink and look at our wonderful merchandise, including this fantastic book. Snap it off, because it's going to be going off the shelves very quickly. And then we will all come out there to meet you. And in the meantime, ladies and gentlemen, could the Future for Nature winners, the board members, the committees, the selection committees, and our guest of honor, please come